as some people believe, is good for some and bad for the majority, does not mean we should remove the opportunity for it to be good for anyone. It doesn't simply mean we should lower the standards. We should uphold the private schools, uphold the innovation of the teaching in private schools, and bring the state school level up to the level of private schools. We cannot simply say, because the private schools have all the money, have all the resources, have all the teachers, that this means the state sector is being deprived of them. No. It is the investment in the state sector provided by the government. It is the focus of the state sector of the government. It is the innovation in teaching that needs to happen in the state sector to improve the education for all, not simply to remove the choice of the minority and to remove the option for some people to have what you believe and what the proposition will tell us is a better education in the private system. So why do we think there is actually a direct benefit of private education in our system? The proposition brought you this already, and we said actually that we believe the free market allows these schools, the private schools, to close the bad ones to keep the good ones. We believe it's also the competition that arises between private schools that allows for direct innovation in teaching. These schools, as we've heard, are not so closely controlled by the regulation. They are not so closed by the idea of politics. They are not so closed by the resources upon them, and therefore they are able to innovate. They have to innovate to attract students. They have to be competitive, and they have to be successful. Therefore, the innovations that happen in the private school allow improvements in the state sector. I'm not going to try and pretend that these things happen directly. I'm not going to try and pretend that these things always happen. But I am saying that the presence of an innovating structure within our society allows influences within education. Our government recognises this. They use trials within private sectors. Within private education to apply into state schools. They use trials of examination techniques in private schools to move into state sectors. And we recognise that the reason they do this is because they believe the power of innovation is greater in private schools. So what have I told you? And I've told you that in limiting the choice of some, we have got to prove it is going to directly benefit others. We have got to prove that is the choice of this minority that is directly harming the state's education within our society. And I simply do not believe this is true. I do not believe that it is the existence of private schools that is harming the state sector. It is the state sector we need to focus on improving. We cannot remove the opportunity of choice for some simply because we want to create a level playing field. The best way to create the level playing field is to raise the standard of our state education. Do not limit the choice of those who want to choose. Therefore, I beg you to oppose.
Very much indeed for her remarks. Our next speaker in favour of the motion tonight is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Teach First. To continue the case for the proposition, I'd like to call upon Mr. Brett Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, to start out, the motion is private schools are a public nuisance. And what I think has been missing is how do we define a public nuisance? And what I've been interested in hearing so far is what is a public nuisance? Let's start by defining a public nuisance as where do you sit? Where do you sit? Because public nuisance can mean different things to different people. And what I think of is going back 400 years to feudal Britain. If you go back 400 years to feudal Britain, you might think that feudalism is a public nuisance, or you might think feudalism is a really good system. It really depends who your parents are, doesn't it? Because if your parents are noble people, it's a great system, isn't it? If your parents are peasants, actually your life is pretty solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. It's not a very good system, is it? And what I would argue today is Britain is the OECD country, the wealthy country in the world that's the closest to having a feudal system today. And for anyone who's read The Economist 2 weeks ago, anyone who's actually seen...
Point of information.
No, I'll just continue with it.
Are you in America?
I'm a naturalized British citizen, and I just sang God Save the Queen to get my British citizenship. So I'm a proud British citizen, everyone. But what I'm proud about is... What I'm not proud about is that the UK is the most feudal country in the OECD, and it has the worst societal mobility in the entire OECD. This was in The Economist about 2 weeks ago. Some of you might have seen it. which means if your parents are wealthy, in Britain, you have a better chance of being wealthy than any other OECD country, any other wealthy country in the world. If your parents are poor, you have a better chance of being poor than any other wealthy country in the world. That's Britain today. Another fact about Britain today is Britain has the highest percentage of children in private schools in Western Europe. That's another fact about Britain today. Now, are these two facts connected or are they not connected? I would argue if they're connected, then there's no question that private schools are a public nuisance. And I'm going to talk a bit about how I think these two facts are very closely connected. To start out, I'd like to get to the point of why do parents send their children to private schools? Do they send them to private schools to get a better education? Or do they send them to private schools to create socioeconomic stratification? Do they send them to private schools to create segregation, their children versus other children? No, yes.
I think it's the former.
I think a lot of people think different things, but I think if you look at the facts will tell us one thing. And let's start with what our teachers tell us. Teach First, we currently have thousands of teachers, over hundreds of Cambridge teachers, teaching in challenging urban schools. You ask them, what do their pupils, all of their pupils, go to schools where at least a third of the children are eligible for free school meals. What do their pupils think of Eton graduates? What do their pupils think of a place like Cambridge? What do their pupils think of people who go to private schools? They think of them as the other. They don't think of them as colleagues. They don't think of them as other citizens. They think of them as, posh, Sloaney. They think of them as people they have nothing at all in common for. And this is even the most intelligent, the most able children in our Teach First schools. Then you ask, yes.
I went to one of these schools that are being bandied about as being awfully great and grand. But I don't consider people who went to any other particular type of school as the other. So actually that's the problem.
Well, that's great for you. But what we've heard from our teachers, I would say that's from what I understand, that's unusual from our pupils. So I think what you got was.
It's unusual in my schools. I mean,
okay.
Schools teach people to be more tolerant of
okay. Well, I think that's an excellent. So what I would hope is more schools are like that, and that's a brilliant school you went to, and I'll have to find out a bit more about that school. What I'm hearing from our teachers is what their pupils in challenging urban areas are thinking about a lot of people in this room, and thinking about a lot of the people who go to private schools. And that's not very good. They don't think of them as national colleagues. Similarly, what do children in private schools think of pupils in our Teach First schools? And we've heard a lot of it from the opposition here today. We've heard some things about the quality of education in inner city schools. We've heard things around the ability of pupils in Teach First schools. And actually, I think some of our pupils and some of the teachers were compared to Nazis in one of the Admiral's arguments. And you can see there's sort of a misunderstanding about what's going on in these schools and what these children are like. Are they hoodies? Are they scary? Are they yobs? Are they going to beat you up if you walk down the street? What our teachers tell us is actually no. They're actually very intelligent children who are very able, very ambitious, who aren't getting the opportunities they need. And it's that sort of misunderstanding that comes from having a country with the highest percentage of pupils in private schools of any Western European country. So if I'm saying the decisions are made because of privilege, not because of education, why am I backing that up? I'll back that up. There's a recent PISA report that just came out last year which shows that the value added of state comprehensive schools in Britain today is higher than the value added of private schools. Some people here might be shocked about that. But if you go to a state comprehensive school, on average, the value of how your test results will go up will be higher than if you go to a private school. So why are all these parents sending their kids to private schools? It's not because it's a better education. I go to lots and lots of comprehensive schools all over London where you can get a fantastic education. You can go to top universities all over the country. Why are they saying